Now, Jerry, now!
What? What now? Now it's on television now, me? What now? It's you? Well, then I haven't got a coat or a tie. Wait a second, don't move nothing. Wait, I'll get a coat. Don't run. What now? I'm on, yeah?
Lights, camera, action. Hello everyone, welcome back to Film2Table, and today we are going to interview our fourth guest for the project. This is Carmen Pelaez. She's an outstanding Cuban-American actor, writer, filmmaker, political activist, and educator. Carmen was my playwright mentor back in April and May for Miami New Drama's production at my school. She has helped and taught me a lot through the writing process, plus inspires me to continue learning through this creative profession. Thank you for being here, Carmen. How are you today?
Good. I'm so excited to be here with you because as a student and as a writer, you really impressed me. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you more about our craft.
Yay, that's great. Now, let's dive into the first question.
I don't think I thought of it as powerful work, which is, I think, probably saved me and probably made it possible for me to make more powerful work than I would have ever hoped for or imagined. I mean, I always love to talk and I always love to make people laugh. I decided to go into acting when I was 15. I auditioned for the highest drama class, even though I'd never taken a drama class. And I didn't know that you had to perform other people's monologues, so I wrote my own. And I got into the class and people loved the writing. So I didn't think much of it. I was going to be first a stand-up comedian. And then I was like, no, I'd rather do scripted stuff. And I think I definitely knew from a young age that I had the ability to bring a character to life. I had the ability to make people laugh. I had the ability to connect with people through my craft. Went to American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, and we had this movement class that we had to write a monologue for, and using these principles of movement. And it was like glide, tap, flitter. It was I think it was called the Lamaze School of Movement. I forgot what it was called, but I wrote this monologue. I graduate, friend of mine says, oh, there's going to be an open mic night at Curricon. Do you want to be, you said you wanted to do a one-person show, because what initially inspired me to get into drama classes was Whoopi Goldberg's solo show. So that was a goal of mine. She did this incredible solo show on Broadway, and I saw it on HBO when I was 15. That was the impetus. Mm-hmm. So my friend calls me and tells me this, and I was like, oh yeah, I've got a monologue, thinking the one that I did for dance class that I just graduated with. And it's a monologue about this, young woman at a club in Miami talking about wearing spandex and getting basically humiliated at the club. Mm-hmm. And so I'm part of this like early 90s scene in New York. Like the guys before me were like playing like banjos, doing this amazing political comedy, and the woman after me was going to be singing an opera, and like two people before that was like very eclectic, very New York, what you think of, and like funny and very heady stuff. And I was backstage and I could feel my heart in my throat, because I was like, nobody's going to care about Juana. No, but people are not going to like, nobody's going to connect with this. This is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? And I'm never afraid to go on stage. Like, that's just not, usually my stage manager's directions are make sure she's awake 15 minutes before, because I tend to fall asleep. If I'm doing a solo, when I was doing my solo show in New York, I would fall asleep. So that was the directive. But this particular night, I was terrified. It was the first time I was doing my writing in front of an audience like that. And I didn't even think of it as my writing, all right? I was thinking of my acting, whatever. And it slayed. Like, people went nuts. And I still remember myself behind the scrim with the blue light coming through, and Cole and Wheeler were killing it. They were such talented guys. And I was like, oh my God. And then I went out there and I just did my thing with Juana, and people lost their minds. When
Wow.
are you going to do more? And that's when I realized, oh, like if you really put your heart and soul into something that you know really well, and if it's a story that you want to tell, it's going to connect.
Mm-hmm.
But it can't be about you. It's got to be about something greater than you. It's got to be about something that that inspires you, that then you take and move forward, right?
Yeah.
So that to me, I think, was probably the first time that I realized, oh, I can really do this. Like things that interest me, I know how to package them in a way that's going to translate to people that know nothing about it.
Yeah.
And that to me is very exciting. And I think that was probably the moment that I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And mind you, I developed my solo play using different monologues around different variety nights in New York that used to happen all the time. Um, Usually I did pretty well. I was very fortunate. People were always interested in the material. But failure is part of it, right? And not doing well is part of it, and having nobody show up is part of it. And I would try a monologue. It would be good, but it wouldn't be great. And then I'd rework it. And then I'd do it again in a different place, and it would have a different effect. So it was all about, it was all about building the story I wanted to tell,
Yeah.
and taking the hits along the way. I think oftentimes people are asked about their successes, and I don't think there is ever success without just ridiculous amounts of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told you this before. I've learned a lot more from my failures than my successes.
Yeah.
My successes are always like, they're awesome. Like, I feel good. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But then with my failures, I'm like, oh my God. And then I have to take the lesson, right? But that's the only way we learn, especially I think when you're in the craft, you're in filmmaking or when you're in theater. Everybody thinks it's going to be a moment where you hit, a moment where your work hits, something that just elevates. Like, no, it's you're literally stringing pearls, and it's one at a time, and you're like, oh, that one doesn't look so good, let me take that off, let me replace it with this. So I think that also is something, what you're telling me, what you're asking me, is something that's been reinforced throughout the years. And as I've gone on, I've learned the ways in which I'm most effective
Mm-hmm.
when I want to do that.
Yeah.
I'm very clear on what my voice is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that reinforces the belief that you can do something that can really communicate.
Yeah, I totally agree because, in the past, even with like basic things that I've done and just tried out, sometimes I wouldn't realize that those failures are just parts of my life where they almost reinforce or push me to succeed. And I feel like when I've gone through just like different activities in general, I used to quit a lot and used to think, oh, I'm not good at this. There's no point in doing it. But I think when you just have that little, almost that like magic touch or that um belief that you're good at something, it motivates you to do more, even if you fail. In It's also a motivator as well. So I
I mean,
think,
listen, I totally understand what you're saying. Like, I had a friend that I was having a really hard time writing, and she's like, well, because you think everything you write's supposed to be great. It comes from arrogance. And I'm like, what? I'm not arrogant. And she's like, yeah, you are. Because I do the same thing. I'll sit down, I'll write, and I'm like, this should be perfect. I've written it. It's not the case. Like, writing is rewriting. And
yeah.
it's always that fear of it's not going to be what I want it to be. It's not going to say what I want it to say. So you avoid it and you don't. But the truth is, you always have to rework it. It's not, I am infinitely uninterested by the things that I'm naturally good at. It's the things that I am not so good at that to me become the focus of my attention. And I think that probably came with getting older.
Okay.
Because when I was young, if I wasn't good at something, I would just be like, eh. But then you look at the greats and then you realize, oh my God, like all of them make it a point of practicing and practicing and getting better and failing and getting up again and failing, getting up again. Nobody is better at this than athletes. The greatest athletes in the world all have, they're the first ones at the pitch, the last ones to leave. The first ones at the gym, the last ones to leave. Like, they all have this practice, and I think sometimes with artists, because so much comes from inspiration, people think like, oh, if I have the muse, if I'm inspired. No, it's work. And it's practice, and you're facing that blank page, and you need to understand you got to put the words in there and rework them, or you're on set and you have to be open to improvisation. That angle didn't work. You're seeing in the monitor, it's not what you wanted. You need to be ready to shift and not just give up, because it's in the shifting and it's in the improvising and it's in that reworking that the really interesting stuff comes out every time. Hardly ever has something come out as is and just been, hardly ever.
That whole like explanation about, helping, about like experimenting with your actors and just having that mindset where your writing it's not going to come out exactly in the way that you believed it to be. And I just made me think of the Romeo and Juliet, how over and over we would, during the rehearsals, I would change lines and change around a bunch of things. And I think, it never comes out exactly in the way that you think it's going to be, not exactly the way you envision it to be, but that's the whole point of writing a script. It's going to come out better maybe in the way, rather than the way you previously envisioned it to be.
Yeah, I mean, you should always have a goal. You have to be clear on what it is that you want to say and what it is that you want to communicate. And listen, I wrote a play where this actor, man, he was hell-bent on doing it his way. There was nothing the director could say to him to get him to do it in a way that I wrote. Nothing. And that was just, I will never work with that actor again. Like, I won't do it. Because you have to, one thing is when an actor brings you something, hey, how about this? Actors are your colors. As a writer for stage, you're pretty much deciding where everything goes. And the director's making sure they're adding their vision, and the actors add their vision, and the scene adds their vision. But everybody's kind of on the writer's page with the same goal. That in film is for the director, right? And are you always going to get exactly what's in your head? Absolutely not. Never. You can ask somebody that has written, a friend of mine is an Academy Award winner. And he was just like, oh, yeah, it's not what I wanted it to be, but, and I'm thinking, what? But that's okay. That is part of the process. But it is also important to know what you want, to be open to the collaboration, because it's all collaborative. Even if it's your vision, it's everybody's collaboration. To be open, but I think it is also important to know what it is you want. And this particular actor, I mean, I wanted blue and he kept giving me red.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And when you see that, you're just kind of like, and the funny thing is that this actor pretended to be so like team player, and he would just take up so much air and space. And I was just always thinking like, you may want to do red, but I've got a red over here. And you don't see that and you don't respect that. And that caused me such consternation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's understandable to get frustrated. But again, the final product lies somewhere in that collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding, and you have to be open when an actor brings you something different, because it might be better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's always, no matter what your form, you're always serving the story.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's your vision, it's the story's story.
Yeah.
And you always got to serve the story. You always got to serve the story. And everybody should be on the same page as far as serving the story. That always needs to be front and center.
Yeah. Have you ever had challenges with becoming a character where it was hard to, you had a difficult character to play and it was very difficult to become and get connected with the character?
Not really, because I have very good training. So what I'm able to do is if I usually you're cast in something because something about you is right for it.
Yeah.
Right? So you have that energy. But for me, because of my training that I got at American Academy, which was incredible, dramatic arts, an incredible school, I always had a handle on the character. Because I would always think I'm a big believer in moment to moment work, especially for film, the Meisner technique. Staying present, open, and listening, that moment to moment work is just vital, especially for film. It's not what you're saying, it's what you're listening to, it's what you're hearing, it's how you're hearing, it's how you're focusing. But also in theater, what I try and do is I find physical entries to my character. I work from the outside in. I'm not a big method actor in that I don't try and regurgitate a
Yeah.
if you're truthful, if you've read the script and if you understand, if somebody's furious, I'm not going to play furious. I'm going to lean on my training, and my objective is going to be burn. So no matter what I say, I want to burn, and and then I get a physical handle. When I was doing my solo play, like my grandmother always lived in my hands.
Yeah.
Juana, which was that first character that I did in that night, was always in her shoulders. So once I had a physical handle on each character, the minute I had to get into them, it was grandmother, Juana is very much like, so that helped me a lot. There are definitely characters that I just played Janet Reno for Miami New Drama, and I couldn't be the more opposite of Janet Reno. But it was fun to be with somebody that's so different from her, or so different from me. And that was when there was a stretch. So the challenge there was to not depend on my tricks as an actor, or what I know works, or what I know is going to make people laugh. And to, Janet Reno talks like this, and she really doesn't move her face, and she's very quiet, and she's bigger than a house, so you would think that. So it's kind of interesting to go from like me, that like, I know I can get laughs on stage if I do this, and this, whatever, to just being all of a sudden like, yes, Mr. President, I understand what you're trying to say. But it was so different that to me, like the handle on that one, for example, was don't move your face. And it would snap me right into it.
Yeah.
But that, I think, probably finding the handles is the most challenging part, because I have the training to rely on.
Were you Janet Reno for was this the most recent play you're talking about?
No, this is for the Elian play.
Oh, okay.
Last year, I think.
Yeah. I saw you posted about the museum play you did. How was that? Was that fun?
That was amazing. Actually, that's an example of a play that I wrote. So it was 6 different playwrights, and everybody wrote their part. And I wrote, what do you call it? I wrote, my 10 minutes, and that's probably the hardest 10 minutes I've ever written in my life. Michelle Hausman, an incredible artistic director and producer, he kept saying, it's good, but I want something different. And no, but this, but, and I felt like he kept changing the goalposts, which was making me crazy. Yeah. And then I kept wanting to do one thing, and he kept wanting me to do another, which made me crazy. And we were fighting so much. And the worst part of it was that I knew what I wanted to say, but it wasn't coming out. I can't tell you, Juliana, I was so close to quitting so many times, and I've never quit on anything in my life. Diets, yeah, but I already start again. But the combination of Michelle wanting something different than what I wanted to do, plus me being very clear on what I wanted to say, it kind of like got me so emotionally wrapped up that I lost any kind of sense of structure. And a fellow actor friend of mine, who's also an incredible writer, I just sent it to him, and he kind of helped remind me. He's like, well, there's no danger here. And like, I kind of know where the characters are. Like, he gave me a very because he had no expectation of it, he gave me a very clear-eyed view of where I was not taking advantage of opportunities in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
That was so hard for me. I can't tell you how hard that process was for me. But once I had it, I literally 2 days before, I sent Michelle a draft, and I still wasn't happy with it. But I said, listen, this is what I have. And he wrote back to me, I can produce this, but it's not a Carmen Pelaez piece. And I was like, son of a bitch! And I kept writing. 2:00 in the morning of the first day of rehearsals is when I finished it.
Oh my goodness.
Walked in, exhausted. I just looked at Michelle and I was like, I'm gonna kill him. And he walks over to me and he gives me a big hug.
Aw.
And I mean, that's an example of a collaboration that was difficult, but we have such tremendous respect for each other that we could get really mad at one another, and be respectful at the same time. We could be uncomfortable with one another and be respectful at the same time, which is very important when you're working with people. But both of us really wanted to serve the story.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's the thing. When you're serving the story, everything else falls into place.
Yeah.
Gives me a big hug. We did the first reading of it. As soon as we had our first reading, I knew I got gold. This is good.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna work.
Yeah.
And it did. And it did. So I was very grateful for that. But it was really challenging. Like that little 10-minute play, man, took it out of me.
Mm-hmm.
That knocked me for a loop. But it ended up being very successful, thankfully.
That's good.
Successful emotionally and theatrically.
Yeah.
Because like people were crying in the audience and laughing, which is always my measure of success, and just theatrically, people really responded to the material. So yeah, but see, that's one that was hard fought. I'm pretty sure I shaved a couple years off the end of my life in that one.
Oh my God. All the stress.
Oh my God, Juliana, you have no idea.
Oy, oy.
That was really hard.
Yeah. Was this in the span of a month or?
Oh no, many months.
Okay.
Because I would do a lot of avoidance. I would avoid writing a lot. I would not want to see, I would not want to sit down. I didn't want to rework it again. I wanted to give myself time to think and blah, 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 like all this stuff. And that's the thing, like, so I wrote a full first draft of a play that was a pretty solid draft in a month when I was working with a dramaturg. And I'd never written a play so fast in my life. I'm a very slow writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the reason I did it was because I had weekly meetings with Jane. And I would tell her, this week, I got very little done. 3 pages. I need a few more days before our meeting. And she'd say, okay, great. Or I would look and say, shit, I haven't done anything. I got to sit down and write. Like I made myself engage with the work every day. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest reminder. That's the biggest lesson for me is when you engage every day, the work's going to benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Because we always have that rush, like an hour before we have to turn it in of like, oh my God, I wish I had more time with this. Yeah. Because what's happened, you just spent the last 14, 15 hours engaging in a very specific way. And now everything's percolating.
Yeah.
That's why you have to engage consistently with what you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was, that was an important lesson to learn.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I think also studies have shown that if you work with whatever you're doing a little bit every day, then it enhances your work and whatever you're learning. And this is why we can't procrastinate.
I mean, procrastinating is basically, I read somewhere that procrastinating is delaying disappointment. So it's just like when I'm really hardcore procrastinating, I try and look at the empty page or I try and look at the document and I tell myself, this will get done.
Yeah.
I will have an end date to this. There will be a point where I'm doing rewrites on this. There will be a point where I write the end. There will be a point where this is it. And I'm done and I'm on to the next. You're going to get to that point. Mm-hmm. I talk to myself a lot. And like, you gotta like, You got to know you're going to get to that point and just forge ahead and move forward. But that's procrastinating is a bitch, man. It messes with you on so many levels, and it messes with your art. We're not better because we procrastinate.
Yeah.
And then I think when you're younger you think, "Oh, I'll get that rush at the end," but you can't make up for the time that you lost while the stuff was percolating in your head when you were procrastinating.
Yeah. Because when thinking
I
of
got my vitamins today, I just realized.
it's okay. Yeah. No, when I do schoolwork sometimes, I think of it as, I'm gonna have, like you said, that rush at the end. But I feel like as I've been getting older, it's been harder for me because I want to think more about what I'm doing. And I think that also applies with stuff that I care about more, especially, I guess, writing the play. But
I mean,
procrastination is an enemy in some cases.
I think it's natural. I have like major ADHD too, so it's like today, and just to show that we're always learning and we're always growing and we're always trying to get better. I'm 1,000 years old, and I've got some things due, and I'm like this morning. Last night I decided I'm not going to read the news in the morning. I'm not going to get on social media until nighttime. These are my the balloons.
How does that happen?
No freaking idea. But I'm like, these are my new rules.
Yeah.
And then I got a couple of emails about breaking news, and I was like, nope, not going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, these are my new rules. So what did I do to procrastinate instead? Started doing the New York Times crossword.
Started doing your Hello Kitty.
Started building my little Hello Kitty Lego.
Yeah.
Like you always find ways, right? But the awareness of it makes me less comfortable with this than with, I'm trying to tell myself, you enjoy writing. You enjoy breaking through. So put yourself in the situation where you can be successful doing what you love doing.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do now, like there was actually a deadline on me returning this, so I had to make sure that I had all the parts, and then I'm like, yeah, I'll just build it now. But I'm trying to tell myself, like, you love to write. When you're on a roll, you love to write. So put yourself on that roll.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm going through. I saw a documentary about how closeted politicians were the ones that legislated the most harshly against the LGBTQ community. Forgot the name of the documentary now. But I saw this documentary and it made me so mad. And then in 2008, when Obama won, I have a friend who's kind of been a mentor to me, brilliant human being. If my worldview would be completely different had I not met him. And he had gotten, he was somebody that knew so much. He knew things like ahead of, before they would happen, he'd be like, and this was going to happen. So maybe he had a little bit of a jaded view of the world. And it was 2007 when Obama was running and people were excited and everything seemed so hopeful. Obama wins and I call him and I'm like, oh my God, we won. And he was like, yeah. And he's like, but we lost in California. Prop 8. They reversed the legalization of gay marriage in California. And I said to him, I promise you that I will always advocate for you until you have the same exact rights that I have. I give you my word. This is now an issue for me. And that basically made it like a calling for me. I've always had lesbian and gay friends and family, as everybody does.
Yeah.
And I've always really respected the LGBTQ community because nothing but hate is thrown at them. And they turn it into culture. They turn it into invention, like the inventions that change our lives. They've literally pushed our society forward in every way possible. And yet people are still trying to tear them down. And
Yeah.
to me, it's so maddening. So when I saw this documentary, I thought, they're the people in power that are closeted are the ones that are the most hateful towards this community every time.
Mhm.
It's always the ones that are screaming about perversions that are the perverts. You know, you don't have big busts on drag queen rings that are molesting children, but we've had a few church scandals now, haven't we? And now recently with cops molesting children. So to me, I wanted to throw it in the face of the hypocrites.
Mhm.
I wanted to show that that place comes from resentment. That hate comes from resentment.
Mhm.
People that aren't brave enough to live their truth want to make sure that nobody else can live their truth.
Yeah.
And it's an ugly place to be. And I wanted to hold a full frontal mirror to that ugliness.
You were.
So when I saw that these men and in power um, were the ones that were making it the most difficult for LGBTQ people to live peacefully without bothering anybody. When I saw these men that were afraid to live their truth attack this community, I just took major offense to it. Which is why I wanted to put up that harsh mirror, because I find that when you have to be that much in somebody else's business, it's because you really hate yourself.
Mhm.
And if you really hate yourself, chances are society has told you you should. Which is why I particularly use the F word that I don't use in my real life in any way, shape, or form. Not even joking. I have gay male friends that will use it like, "Oh, you big F," or this or whatever, and I don't find it funny. The same way that I don't find the N word funny.
Yeah.
I find it violent. So I wanted to be that confrontational about it, because the other thing people do is they say, "Well, I don't hate gay people. I just don't." There's no I just if you're not gay, then being gay is something that doesn't concern you at all. Like, you know? So I wanted to make that statement. I
Mhm.
wanted to show somebody that has been so perverted by malevolent forces that are anti-human, anti-love, anti-normalcy, that he started to believe and espouse them. And it's something, I always say ally till I die. It's a cause that, interestingly enough, when the film was finally completed and I tried to get it on the film festival circuit, I had a couple people reach out to me and say, "Oh, it's very good, but that kind of hate's a thing of the past. um, Gays can get married now." It was in a positive moment for civil rights for the gay community, for the LGBTQ community, and everybody kind of thought like, "Oh, this is a great message, but we learned it." And now I'm like, "Oh my God, like how far we've fallen is so shocking to me."
Yeah.
I can't resubmit because those kind of things, once you make a film, you can't usually resubmit it. But to me, what's absolutely shocking is just how far we've fallen. Like the idea that if I were to submit this film today, everybody would be like, "Oh my God, yes."
Yeah.
But it's a film that I actually hold really, really dear to my heart. It was the first time I did something. It was my second short film, and I wanted to make a hard statement. And in that, I think I accomplished it.
Yeah. It was really well done.
Thank you.
And
I had
yeah,
an incredible team.
yeah. And um no, I just thought the storyline was really good and the message you were putting out. But like you said, I feel like when I watched it, I mean, I'm a teenager living in this era with all of this madness happening in the world. And, when I saw it, that statement really applied to like a lot of the things that I see happening around me. But I think, like you said, if we went back maybe like 10 years ago, a lot of the people would have been less aware and less concerned about that when we've
Oh,
seen, yeah.
my gay friends are like, girl, it's over, we're fine. And I'm like,
No, that foreshadowed everything.
I was like, I hope so. I don't know, because the pendulum always swings. I hope you're right. I'd love to be wrong on this. And yeah, it's, I think I've always identified with the underdog. I think I've always been a fat kid and I've always been treated terribly because of it. Something that is really my biology. From a young age, my parents never made me think there was anything wrong with gay. It was just not what they were. It was just different.
Yeah.
So I never had a negative association, quite the opposite. I always had a very positive association with gay people because, and this is a huge blanket statement, I understand, but my mother's gay friends were wonderful and loving and caring and fun, growing up, my lesbian and gay friends and trans friends and queer friends, like I find, when a community is so beleaguered and so beaten down, this community in particular opens up and gives even more love and is even more empathetic and compassionate and funny and brave. And I find those to be such wonderful qualities that I think that, the problem isn't in their community, it's in ours. The problem is not in the gay community, it's in the straight community.
Yeah.
And identifying as I do, cisgender, heterosexual, I feel like I have to talk to my people and be like, get the fuck over yourself, because this is just ugly and stupid.
Yeah.
And I feel that I feel very much that way about all the prejudices that I feel very strongly about racism in the same way. It's not a Black problem. It's not a Latino problem. It's a white people problem.
Yeah.
And it's a cancer that Black people die of, that Latino people die of, but that starts in the white heart. And I find it so brutally appalling.
Yeah.
That communities of color ever have to deal with a constant torrent of ignorance and hate. That I definitely, the other day I was putting together my website and I looked at all my projects and I was like, my God, I'm super political. And when I told a couple of people this, they were like, duh. And I was like, injustice kills me.
Yeah.
It just kills me. I have no patience for it. And I really think my prejudice is stupidity and racism and injustice. Like when somebody thinks it's okay to just treat somebody else on a basis of their identity, their skin color, their heritage, who they love, how they express their sexuality, any of that, and they decide to target them, that person becomes a target for me. Because I'm just like, stop. Just stop. You're dumb. Stop. And I'm very unforgiving. In a way that you should be, you should definitely be open and forgiving, but certain things I'm just like,
it's annoying. Yeah.
You're just an asshole.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend you're not.
Exactly. It's always like, I guess in the case of racism, the majority that feels as if they're threatened, so then they have to threaten or cause harm amongst others, prejudice, racism. And it's like,
but you know what, to me, Juliana, what they're threatened by is grace. What they're threatened by is all of the things that they lack. And the reason that they lack them is the reason they feel threatened. It's like a snake that eats itself, because white Western culture has been so predominant. When you start to look at the things that white people have done, not that like the indigenous people in South America, Central America, Latin America, like all of Latin America, all those indigenous nations fought amongst each other. They killed each other, they did human sacrifices on another, and then when the Spaniards came over, they said, "Oh yeah, you want Montezuma? I know where to get him." Like they turned on each other, and that's where white culture really rooted itself and kept dividing these people.
Yeah.
But if you look at if you look at the harm that's been inflicted by slavery, by imperialism, by nation growing, and you look at the fact that all of these people that and all these communities and all these countries that have been absolutely devastated by the violence inflicted upon them, and their response has truly been to move on. Like if you think about it, their response has been, no, we're going to go forward. We're just going to take care of ourselves. We're going to move forward. We're going to forgive. We're going to forgive. We're going to move forward. You know, listen, it's for that every slave insurrection should have happened, and it didn't. You know, like the to me, what's impressive is the control that these people that have been so violently put upon have expressed is so impressive. And I think that's where the hate and the resentment come from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think they could show that grace and control. I mean, people are fighting for basic equity here. Basic equity, and they're losing their minds. These people would not survive being in the situation that they have for centuries put people of color in.
Yeah.
They're not surviving. They're freaking out. They're turning into these like wild hate mongers that institute these insane laws for basic equity.
Yeah.
I think that speaks so much more to the power of these communities that have been so ravaged and their true strength.
Yeah.
You know, and if in any way, shape, or form through my work, I can illuminate a story that's going to make somebody think like, oh wait, I'm being a hypocrite, or like, yeah, there's what am I doing? If I can drop in the seed of a question into somebody's mind through a a, a, a piece that I craft, I'm incredibly grateful for that. That was something that it was brought together after the July 11th attack. Excuse me, after the Cuban Biden's Cuban advisory team was brought together after the July 11th protests in Cuba.
Oh, okay.
And what I did was I basically tried to hold place for and advocate for my friends and family on the island that what do you call it, that are working towards Cuba's liberation. I really wanted to center the people that were putting their bodies on the line. And basically it's, you know, when you're in that position, you're brought in of like, okay, how do you think we should move forward? What can we do to help the Cuban people? I was incredibly impressed with Biden's intelligence. I was incredibly impressed with his vision, his empathy for what the people were living. Incredibly impressed by the fact that he immediately wanted to step in, and he advised, it was early in his presidency, and he advised this entire Security Council to really get on it. At the end of the day, we're still dealing with a dictatorship.
Yeah.
And a dictatorship's going to dictator. But it's interesting, you know, definitely I would say physically, President Biden definitely seemed very old, but mentally I was blown away by his way of thinking and his leadership in that moment. So we haven't been called together in a while. Since that time, we hadn't really been called together. here and there, but not at the White House like that. But it's interesting because you're in a position where you're speaking to the most powerful administration operating in the world, and my entire goal was to make sure that the voice of the people was being heard.
Yeah.
The voice of the most disenfranchised had a seat at that table. So I was really kind of like in my art a conduit, you know. I was the transistor radio that was like bringing in like, this is what they're asking for, this is how you can support them, this is what they're telling me they need,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what I think would be a good way forward. But I was one in a room of many.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's always it's interesting to me to see the way government works, because you never get everything you want. There's always steep compromises involved. Nobody's ever totally happy. But there are people that very much are trying to do the right thing, even if it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
And the right thing is never easy. Never. Never, 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 never easy.
Yeah.
You can have the right perspective, but to implement the right thing, to me, it's shocking how many, like, I think about this all the time, actually, how many forces there are in the world to do the wrong thing. Like, if all those people decided one day, you know what, we're not going to do the wrong thing anymore. We're going to do the right thing. Instead of spending millions upon millions of dollars to lobby Congress to keep the minimum wage at $13, we're going to give our employees a $2 an hour, pay. Like, to me, it's just amazing. It's, power's fascinating to me, obviously, as I explore it a lot in my work. And it's just like, doing the right thing is never easy, but there is nothing more satisfying, or nothing that makes you feel better, even if it comes at your personal sacrifice, than doing the right thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the world like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a pretty long answer to
Yeah. No, I think a lot of your work is from your political beliefs and what you believe in. And I think that's great because you're able to tell more stories and envelop more of your ideas. And yeah, I feel like for me, in terms of politics, I believe basic human rights and basically everything you believe in. I just feel like I'm not as politically involved. I mean, I'm still young, but I think I still have a lot to learn. But um yeah, again, you inspire me with your whole
you.
idea on
Listen,
politics and storytelling.
being being in politics is not easy, because you really have to swallow a lot that you don't
Yeah.
want to swallow. Um, and you see things that you are completely in disagreement with, and you've been outvoted. Um, but I think the one thing that I've learned, Juliana, is that personally, like you said, like, human rights are always a thing for you. That's I've learned human rights are always a thing for me. Like, yes, I'm a Democrat. Yes, I'm a huge Democrat. I but I'm not partisan. Like,
Mhm.
the Democratic Party aligns with my beliefs. But if there's a Democratic candidate that does not, and the Republican candidate isn't somebody that wants to set the house on fire, I'll consider the Republican candidate. I go issue by issue. And I think there are plenty of things that the Biden administration has done that I may not agree with personally.
Yeah.
But I think the worst thing you can do is turn away from it. The worst thing you can do is not have an opinion. The worst thing, like, there's a lot of nihilism right now, especially amongst the left. A lot of nihilism, a lot of tear it down, burn it down. And I'm like, yeah, that's what got us these three justices that are basically turning back 50, 60 years of American legislation in quick little cases. So I think, very much like writing, I think it's important to be engaged and know where your personal moral focus is, and understand when you advocate that that's the spot, that's the place you need to advocate from.
Mhm.
Because when you can advocate from your personal core beliefs, you can make informed decisions that you can live with, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And if you want to sit one out, never vote. I've never sat out a vote. But if you want to say, I really don't agree with this and I don't want to get on this bandwagon, you can sit off that bandwagon. You don't have to, but I think it's important to remain malleable and open
Yeah.
and to hear, to listen. I've been moving more, trying to step away a little bit from politics, still advocating, but trying to step a little bit away from politics because so many people are turned off by it right now. And I understand why, but so I still stay informed, but I do think it's also important to sometimes get some air and recognize that there's other ways to relay a message, you know, a completely apolitical work can be completely political.
Mm-hmm.
You can put up a portrait of a flower and it can knock your socks off and remind you of freedom. So
Yeah.
it's like, I think it's important to find balance in expression,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily hit people over the head with the politics, get them in the heart with the effects of it.
That's what you do through all your projects. You hit
I
them.
try.
Wow.
I try.
Mm-hmm. Um, but yeah, uh, I'm, I think I'm someone who I I think I kind of hit the worst side of not having an opinion, especially since I'm gonna be 18. I'm gonna be able to vote now for this election.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thanks. But yeah, I think I want to be more politically involved. I tell myself I don't have the time, but I think I'm almost like I'm not scared of it. I'm just almost unaware, and I don't understand it. I understand it. I'm aware, but I'm not so ingrained in what is going on, and I feel like it's important, especially since I'm the new generation that's emerging and is going to take control eventually and is starting to. So,
But you also don't have to be a policy expert. You also don't have to know everything. You
yeah.
know, yes, it's important for you and for to get all your friends to vote as well. I think it's important to make an informed vote.
Mhm.
I think it's important to vote your values.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to be a policy expert.
Yeah.
You don't have to have an overreaching political understanding of how the economy works to vote.
Mhm.
You just have to say, is this an economic model that I think is fair?
Yeah.
Or is it not fair? Like, do I think unions are a good thing or do I think unions are a bad thing? Like, there's plenty of issues. Do I believe in a woman's autonomy over their own body, or do I not believe in a woman's autonomy over their own body? Like, there are some very simple black and white things through which you can, I believe, make an informed vote on without knowing all the nitty gritty. I don't know all the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
I have friends that run circles around me, because they make their career of it, you
Mhm.
know. But I think it's an awesome responsibility,
Yeah.
and it's one you must engage in.
Mhm.
I'm so super dopey about it. I like get excited when
Yeah.
I vote. I like keep my stickers, and there's also organizations like my sister's organization, Miami Freedom Project, that if you just want to know what's going on more or less, you can follow them on Insta and just see, like, oh, that's what their issue stands there and that issue right now is standing there. Like, there are organizations that put it in plain speak, and you can see what your options are.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
But
that's a better way to get all your information. Yeah, because sometimes the news is just going over everything, and it's almost wants me to not makes me not want to watch it because it goes into the nitty gritty, and then the nitty gritty is just almost complicated. Too.
the same, Juliana. I barely watch cable news anymore, and I have friends that are on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I have friends that are literally on MSNBC, have their own shows, and I barely watch. Like, I'll watch them every once in a while, but it's too
Yeah.
much. I read my news more than I watch it.
Yeah, I think that's better. Also, it's so funny because my dad always has the news on. I don't even to make the effort to go watch it unless I have to, because I want to sit in the living room and he doesn't want
What
to.
channel does he watch? Out of curiosity, what channel does he watch?
MSNBC or CNN.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
definitely.
mean, when I watch, I usually watch MSNBC because I have so many friends on it, and I know like they have really good like they tell the truth. You know,
Yeah.
they go off on Trump too much, not because I think there's a problem going off on Trump. It's because I want to hear the good things that Biden is doing on the news too, not just how horrible Trump is, but the accomplishments of this administration I feel aren't celebrated enough
Yeah,
because
that's
they're huge accomplishments.
one thing about the news. They always portray the negative, and then that's when I get confused because I want to hear where what areas we're progressing in, but then I'm not hearing that, so I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, maybe I'm just not going to watch this.
Yeah, totally. I totally get that. I totally get that. I layer it. I layer it. So what I started with there was I did a project called the Loteria Plays, where the Mexican Loteria cards, they each have a different symbol. What I would do is I was taking a one act class, one act playwriting class, and I pick, whenever we get the assignment, I'd pick a couple of cards, and then based on the image on the card, the shape, what it was, what it called up in me, I created a character. And for this one, I picked the star and the pear.
Yeah.
And the star reminded me of a celebrity, and the pear of like an older woman. And I was dealing a lot at the time with a lot of the prejudices in Hollywood towards Latinos. And all the auditions that I would get would be very much like, Mister, wanna buy my sister? She's almost a virgin, you know, or like, I can clean that up for you, Mr. Tony. I don't know what happened. My husband a drug dealer, you know, all this like ridiculous stuff, which is one of the reasons I started writing for myself, by the way, because everything I was auditioning for was just bananas dopey and bad. Um, but I started developing it. Like I thought about I don't like novelas at all, and my mom loves them, and my sister would get into them every once in a while, and I was living with my sister, and I I just thought like I had heard that the reason that novelas were shot so badly. My cousin's a cameraman. And he's like, you know, the reason that it's so flat and the colors are so bright and the acting is so big and it's because a lot of the people that watch these novelas watch them after a long day of work of taking care of children or of cleaning a house, and they listen to them. They don't really watch them, or they're tired and they need the vibrant to kind of keep them engaged.
Yeah.
And I also thought about like the stereotypes of every novela. They always go along this, you know, and supposedly the indigenous maid is always like, doesn't look indigenous at all, you know, and it's really like they put a little like tanner on her and, you know, because of like the caste systems pretty much in a lot of these countries. So I took something that I knew, something that everybody knows, novelas. I considered what a lot of these people go through when they're crossing, how misunderstood they are once they're here,
Yeah.
and how they're not really seen.
Hmm.
They're kind of invisible, the same way that we're invisible. So as I developed this little one act play, I layered all these things. I just layered them, and it kind of wrote itself as I layered it. And then there was a call to write a short film, to enter a short film competition, and my friend had won it the year before, the HBO New York International Film Festival short film competition. And he's like, "Oh, you should apply." So what I did was I adapted it for screen,
Oh, okay.
and it's funny because I was not going to apply, and I
Yeah.
just said, "Oh, I'm not doing anything tonight," and I adapted it, and I
Mm. Yeah.
got to direct it, which was insane because it was the first time I'd ever directed anything.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to make sure that I was paired up with somebody that did have directing experience. So I reached out to Nicolas Calzada, who's a family friend, went to NYU Film School. They knew him. And I said, listen, I won this. I know what I want to do with it. Do you want to co-direct with me? And he was like, happy to co-direct with you, but you need to know that you're in charge. I'm not making any decisions. I'm deferring everything to you. And um, you're at the helm here. I'm
Yeah.
going to support you, but you're at the helm, which is incredibly, incredibly generous of him, smart of him, because there was one point in the edit where he wanted to edit it a different way. And I was like, no,
Mm-hmm.
the laugh is here. And I knew what I wanted. And we edited it my way. I had the final word on it. And then when we saw it with a big audience, he was like, you were right. And that just speaks to how talented Nick is. That just speaks to the fact that Nick knows who he is. Because when you're really talented, generosity isn't a problem. When you're really talented, you want to see other people succeed. When you're really talented, you want to back other people up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that just speaks to Nick's abilities. But he basically gave me like a master's class in filmmaking on that set
Yeah.
because he was there to basically catch me if I fell. It's like, well, you don't want this angle, you want to think about that angle. Oh, you're right. Like really teaching me.
Yeah.
Deanna Winkler actually did the same for me. She was my assistant director for Queen Without His Crown, and I met her because Tribeca did a little talk back for when I did the acting lesson, and I didn't even know what a shot list was. Like I was like, oh yeah, didn't the DP do that? You know? And yeah, I remember seeing one, and Deanna really sat down with me and really taught me this is what the process is. So in a way I had better opportunities before I was prepared for them, but I had people that were willing to collaborate and share their knowledge with me because they could see that A, I was serious about what I was doing, and B, I really cared about the collaboration. I wanted everybody to do well. So I've been very fortunate in that. And that's pretty much how I got through acting lesson, building like something that Nick told me is you don't want to narrate a moment where you see the same moment. You want it to be, you want to juxtapose, you know? So little things like that I already had the story, I was able to edit out a lot, and then I was able to layer in some fun, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the tropes that we know, some of the handles that people know that they can easily latch onto, so they think they're safe with me, and then I get them. And then I get them to think. So
Yeah.
that was I mean that process was kind of the same as everything else. One thin layer of paint at a time.
Yeah.
And you build and you build and you build and you build and then you decide okay, that's enough. But it's about being open and being aware to not only what I want to say or what I want to explore as an artist, but to the world and where everybody else is and what they're seeing or not seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is the co-director, did he do a play at Miami New Drama?
No.
College? Oh, I think I'm thinking of another playwriter who did Two Sisters and a Piano. I
Oh,
think
that's
it's
Nilo Cruz.
oh, I thought of two N's and then I just mixed it up. But yeah. Um yeah, I love the plot twist in the film. I didn't expect they were gonna be mother and daughter. I thought that was awesome.
Thank you.
You always
I also wanted to do the like moment of novelas.
yeah,
Yeah, so that's where you play with an existing trope.
exactly. Yeah. You had a lot of symbolism too. That's what I like when I also with my other play that I wrote, I did in the beginning of the year. I wasn't as, I'm not so experienced, but the first one was my very first one. So had a lot of symbolism, and that's one thing I really like because I feel like incorporating that in your play, maybe the people who are reading it would notice and then they'd see how clever it is, and I think that's a really cool aspect to a lot of different plays when they have that symbolism. That's why I like the cards at the beginning. That was really cool. Yeah.
You always want to have the layers. You
Exactly.
always want to have it. There's a great painter, Malevich, that in like I think 1914, he painted this thing called White Cube. You look at this work of art, you look at this canvas, and it's white, but it's so much more. And turns out he painted it red, then blue, then yellow, then green, then all these colors. And people were making fun of him. They're like, and you paint it white? Like, what are you doing? And he was just like, they're going to know the other colors are there. And that's, you never want to do something for the sake of being clever. You want the cleverness to come out of the work that you've done. And that to me was always a lesson, because when you look at it, it feels much more, like something much more than a white canvas. And when you look closely and the paint is cracked, you can see all the layers. But you have to look for them, and that was a big lesson to me. I've learned a lot from visual art and seeing how visual artists are able to represent themselves and what they want to tell through one shot, one canvas, one work, one piece.
Yeah.
And I try and incorporate all of that into my writing.